Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for a design subcommittee meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. Today's date is Tuesday, July 15th, and this is session B of the BCDC Design Subcommittee. The Planning Department continues hosting public meetings in a virtual setting for the health, safety, and accessibility of Boston residents. I'm Christina Rico, Executive Director of the BCDC, and before we begin with the agenda, I'm required by open meeting law to notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off your camera and microphone if you do not wish to be recorded. Um, and for the record, Commissioners Lubenow, Haseen, Nagahiro, and Solano have joined us this evening. And tonight's agenda will include presentations for a proposed project at 181 through 185 West First Street, South Boston. Tonight's meeting proceedings will follow the typical BCDC Design Subcommittee meeting format, beginning with a brief presentation from the proponent, followed by comments from the commissioners, then public testimony and a discussion of next steps. Please bear with me while I promote all of the presenters to co-host here. And if folks are able to raise their hand, I'm able to see you more clearly for promoting. So I got you, Peter. I've got you, Ron. I see you, Erica.
And Anton, Christina.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. So a proposed project at 181 through 185 West First Street, South Boston, seeking notice of project change or NPC entitlement, contemplates increasing the proposed height and density of an approved project previously reviewed by this commission and approved by the board in 2014. This will be the fourth presentation of the proposed NPC to the commission, following an introduction at the January 7th monthly meeting and subsequent presentations to the design subcommittees on April 15th and May 20th. This is a reminder to the proponent that presentations will be limited to 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 2-minute heads up when you're approaching the end of that time. And with that, I invite the proponent team to begin presenting whenever you're ready.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not just yet. We can see that you're starting screen sharing. There it goes.
Okay. So this project's at the corner of C Street, West First Street and East First Street. I mean, West First Street and West Second Street, I'm sorry. It's right next to the Signal Building in the West Square Apartments. We've started this project back in summer of 23 till now. We originally started with the BPDA and neighborhood meetings, and then we are now with the BCDC meetings. The last subcommittee meeting, there was really two main things that were tabled at the end of the meeting. One is the landscape design seemed to be not meeting the standards that BCDC would like it to meet. And there was no accessible access between the park and the courtyard. I think the comment was there was confusion about the use and whether it was for the residents or whether it was for the public. And then the second issue that was on the table was that the C Street facade did not meet the street. It had poor street activation. So the massing I'm going to go through is what was eliminated from the January to the May design. So from the January to the May design, we've eliminated a big portion of this single unit corridor that runs along the Mahoney Park. And that was put back approximately 30 feet to increase the size of the parklet. And then the top floors were redesigned. This park right here was the area that was increased in size. And this is the resident courtyard that ties into the park. We've now defined the use. So we have an expanded sidewalk. So a very small piece of the park is used by the public, and the rest is an amenity package for the residents of the property. This is the redesign. We've done a couple of things here. We've eliminated the egress that came out of the basement that tied into the park, so there's no more of an egress here that ties into the walkway, which allows us to have much more green area right here. We've put in a handicap ramp that ties the courtyard into these parklet in the front. And we've put 3 use areas in the residential side of the park, and we've put a little public use area in the front of the park. And this is what we've got for our residential uses. So we have a pergola and a barbecue area with tables on the area that's closest to the building, and then shrubbery all around that area. Then we've taken the middle area and we have 2 fire pits, which are blocked off with some nice shrubbery between that and the transformers. And then we have an open grass area for chairs and seating in the front of the parklet. We then have some fencing, which we've reduced to 42-inch picket fencing that borders where the residential uses the property. And we've put shrubbery and a bench along the sidewalk for the public use. And these are some pictures of the intended uses of the park. We've got a comparison between what was in the past and what we have now, and we started with this design in January, which the park was 56 feet deep. You had the egress coming out into the walkway, and the park was just basically open space with a little seating area. In the May 25 design, we had 2 lawn areas with a fire pit in the middle. Again, we had that stairwell with a walkway leading to the stairwell that was part of the park. So this stairwell was completely eliminated. You now see green shrubbery in this entire area. This became a pergola with a picnic area and grills. We've increased the size of the fire pit area and put 2 nice seating areas around 2 fire pits. And then we have a green area in the lower third of the residential use. And then we've got a little bench for the street if anybody wants to sit down, with some nice shrubbery around the fence. And that is blocked off with a fence and a gate that leads into the residential part of the park. This is a rendering of the use to show you the shrubbery and the different uses of the park, and it also showing you how the building next door is exposed. One of the goals was to make sure we had that building fully exposed to light and air. So you have the grill area back here. You then have your 2 fire pits in the middle section of the park, and then a nice green area in the front of the park with a bench for pedestrians that come by. We've shrubbed in front and behind our picket fence to obscure it from the street level. And then this is Mahoney Park next to us, which has shrubbery all along the opposite side of that picket fence. These are sections through the different streetscapes. The one thing that I did want to mention in the sections is that we did increase the sidewalk to 6 feet clear distance, which was a request of the subcommittee, on C Street. So now we have 6 feet clear on C and Second Street, and we have 8-foot-1 clear on First Street. The other thing that we've battled with is how the streetscapes ties into the C Street elevation of the property. So we originally had red brick, and the retail area was partially at the corner of First Street. And the comment was it really doesn't tie into the streetscape. So we've significantly changed the design. We've actually added 2 stoops that break the building into thirds. These stoops actually go into 2 of the units, and we've taken each of the thirds and have slightly different designs as you go up C Street. We've changed the brick on the base of the building to a dark brick all the way around the building. We've enlarged the retail area on First Street. We've also made the bike room look like a retail area as well, getting plenty of light into the bike room area. In this middle section, what we have we have our garage vents in that middle section. So what we've done is we've increased the size of the plantings and the shrubs in the middle section of the building here. In the bottom section, we've actually decreased the size of the plants and we've added 2 benches along the street. This is one of our stoops that ties into the building. Because we only have 3'3" on our street now because of the side increasing the sizes of the sidewalk. The stoop actually enters the building, but you have a little usable area probably for plants and sitting on the side of the stoop, and this stoop goes directly into a unit. We've made sure that the stoop does not interfere with our parking spaces downstairs, so you have a slight decrease in the nose of the parking, but it works fine for parking cars. Oh, we've also changed the color of the brick to a darker brick, and we've done some different coursing on the brick to detail the top as it meets the precast portion of the transition between the dark and the red brick. This is a rendering looking down C Street of the property, and this is the corner that's changed significantly. This is a little more, this is the old version of that corner that shows you just the retail at the corner of First Street and not the bike room having lots of glass or the darker brick. This is the new version where the glass extends around the corner, ties into C Street, and the transition with the darker brick. Your stoops break up the building again in the 3 sections, and they're in this rendering right here. At this point, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you tell us a little bit about, I guess I'd like to understand the dark brick. Is there one thing that would be helpful in future presentations is to have some photographs of the surrounding context and the precedents that you're drawing upon that inform your selection of materials. And just, again, just curious what the inspiration was for that dark brick.
We've always had dark brick along the retail section on First Street. And that started from the previous design back in 2014, and it's evolved to going around the building. I think it was actually the BCDC that commented that the dark brick looked better on the base of the building than the red brick in a couple of our meetings. And so it's transitioned to taking it around the building. One of the things that we've done as a transition, Anne, is the building has become very simplified in the materials and the gyrations in the building. Previously, we've had a dark section on the corners and some dark metal on other parts of the building. All that dark metal has been reduced or eliminated actually from the rendering. The whole profile of the building has been simplified, and I think the dark brick just magnifies that there's a base to the building all the way around the building. The building across from us is yellow and dark brick. That's West Square. That also has a dark brick. It's not a red brick on the upper levels. It's a yellow brick, and different sections of West Square are a darker brick. The Signal building on the other side of us is a red brick with a copper metal on that building. So the buildings are slightly different. We do have photos in an appendix if you would like to go through them. There are 4 appendixes or 5 appendixes to these slides that I can go through with you if you'd like to see the photos of the surrounding area.
Okay. Well, and actually, let me preface this by saying, thank you for the presentation. I realize this has been a long and extensive process for you, and we are happy to see, the development of new housing in the city, so that you're providing a much needed development in the city. I think as you again, bring forward this, and I know we want to focus on just having been a part of this review at the last two subcommittee meetings, we did discuss that, our key concerns, as you summarized, include, how the building meets the ground. And I'd love to have my fellow commissioners weigh in, both in terms of the architecture of the building and the landscape. I know for me, it was, you provided some really valuable clarification as to the relationship between the resident courtyard and the adjoining Mahoney Park. I think that was something we really wrestled with in prior meetings. But I would encourage you, and I appreciate the attention to the introduction of the stoops along the buildings. Again, I would encourage you, when you bring this to future meetings, and I realize it's always a challenge to balance what you're presenting within the constraints of time and slides, but I encourage you and your architect to really integrate some images that help us understand, or help whoever's reviewing the project understand the choices that you make and how they respond to the surrounding context, because that is part of our purview.
Thank you.
But so David and Laura.
Well, I mean, I'll just say I haven't seen the project for a long time. I did see it a number of times, and I appreciate actually the massing changes and the clarity around the fact that the green space is in fact a kind of front yard for the building rather than a part of the other park. And I think that, clarifying that is helpful. I am a little curious. I see a gate there and I'm just trying to understand, is that like fobbed for residents, or is that really mostly for egress only, and people approach this park from inside the complex? Just trying to understand that, Peter.
I think we have the gate so that they can access it both ways, David. They can come in from the building side of the property, or they can come in from the street side of the property and can walk right into the property.
Okay, and okay. I mean, I figure from a security point of view, you'll figure that out, like exactly how that works. But I know that you made changes to reduce the shadows to the adjacent park and to bring the scale of the building down on that side. I think that's successful, and I would defer to Laura on any comments on the landscape, recognizing, of course, that it is a private landscape and that this is not really a part of the public realm. But is part of the public realm from the perspective of being seen from the public realm, right? So that's something that I think, a nuance that we may want to consider as we think about this space. As far as the architecture goes, Peter, if you could maybe go to a different image. I'm okay with the change of color at the base. I mean, I think that that's something that you may ultimately want to work out with the designers at Boston Planning as to what the right bricks are, what the right brick colors are, et cetera, and making sure that that relationship to West Square across the street isn't like having two dark bases. May be good, may not be good. I'm not entirely sure. That would be something that would probably be helped with a more specific conversation. I think the introduction of the stoops is actually helpful because it does create a little bit more residential syncopation along the edge. On the architecture side, I would just comment, and again, this might be something that gets resolved at a later date, but with the metal panel systems that you're showing for the corners and the bays, a lot of whether that's successful or not has to do with the trim details around the windows, whether there's oil canning, all of that kind of stuff that's relative to the installation. So I think that if you end up coming back to the full commission, you may want you may want to either reassure us about that, or you may expect a caveat on ensuring that the execution is really good there, because unfortunately in this neighborhood there have been a number of buildings, and I'm not saying this about you, Peter, but there have been a number of buildings that at the rendering level look okay, and then there's a level of detailing that just isn't executed to a
Right.
standard that I think the neighborhood
Yeah, I
deserves.
understand perfectly, David. We actually used a similar material on 10 St. George Street in the South
Oh,
End.
yes, sure. I know. I know it well.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
so and that was a historical replication that the South End Landmark wanted us to do. So
yeah.
we're quite familiar on metal detailing, especially. This is a reverse standing seam. We won't go more than an 8-inch exposure on the actual um, pressed metal.
Yeah.
We don't get that oil canning on it.
Okay. I just,
So, but I mean, I can take pictures of that and show the subcommittee that building and what that looks like.
sure. I mean, yeah, and you know what I mean, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
no, I know
it's,
exactly what you mean.
there's some
It-
unfortunately really,
yeah,
really
it-
bad examples.
yeah,
Um, but I think that the bringing the glass around for the bike room seems like a good idea. You know how that glass is treated. You know, maybe it's frosted, maybe light is coming in, but you don't actually see the space that much. That could be something that you get that you figure out. But in general, I'm getting more comfortable with the strategy. Obviously, how it meets the sidewalk as the sidewalk rises up. And again, maybe Laura can speak to the landscape on that side. I don't know what the orientation is. The fact that the steps do project, those are not projecting across the property line, I presume. So you've set the
no,
building back.
yeah,
Okay. So making sure that those planting beds um, uh, are successful is obviously going to be key. Um, but I think that because the stoops do project into that area, it is important. It will be important to soften that somehow. Whether it's across the full length of the facade or just in front of those stoops, I'm not sure. Um, I guess those are my initial thoughts. I would also say that another thing I would like to raise the red flag on a bit, because of what I've seen in the neighborhood, is just the mechanical equipment on the roof, and how it's screened, and to what extent it's visible, is something that I would like the plan reviewer to be paying close attention to, because that's been another sort of fail throughout the neighborhood. That's it. That's all I got.
Could we go back to the plan?
the landscape plan.
Yeah, please, Peter.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Let's go to that perspective, because I think that might be a little easier to talk over. So I appreciate what you've done with the spaces in there. There's a lot more possibility for programming, and I think that extending the size of those spaces has been helpful. The thing that I think is so telling about this perspective is, we talked a lot about that space for the residents to truly be the space for them. And I think what this perspective shows is that there's still too much transparency between the public park as well as that park for residents. And in that way, I think it's still a little ambiguous who it's for. Is it a subspace of the park itself, and there's an easy gate that you can go around, and is it a quiet space for the park? But we know it's not. We know that in this housing type, you are really trying to create a space that residents can really feel claim to, which urban residents don't get to do that very much, lay claim to landscape space. And I wonder if it isn't something as simple about the way that the landscape is arranged. Right now, all of the landscape is kind of in a line at the edge, and I know, or I think you're doing it to maximize, say, the amount of lawn, or really trying to give as much space as you can to both the lawn and the other spaces. And I think that it would help if you could, as a landscape architect, it's really tough to do a landscape in a straight line, right? Because it just becomes kind of another architectural piece. And I don't think you mean that. I think that really the idea is that you've created a space where people can really come and relax, but they don't like to be watched. Views in are just fine, but I think that you need to think about how those can be orchestrated. Views in and out are actually helpful for safety, but I think when everything is exposed, that it won't feel as comfortable to be in either space, frankly. So I think a little more study on what the edges of the landscape are like might be helpful. The other thing is the building material itself. Peter, what is on the bottom of is that still the metal cladding there that's going around the corner? Let me, here, I'm granted a pen in these meetings, so I'm so happy. What is this material versus this
Oh,
material?
this isn't our building, Laura. This is the neighbor that's already built. That's concrete and wood siding.
Got it. Okay. And so I'm wondering whether or not you need something a little bit different here to help warm this up and not to allow so many so many views in.
So you're saying more landscaping on that edge too to block his wall from.
Well, or maybe a different type of fence. I don't have a problem really with changing the fence on one side versus the other.
I see what you're saying.
But I think it might help to do that. And I'm a little concerned about the enclosure. The enclosure, you're representing a condition that's going to take a while to achieve with the transformers. And I'm wondering if you just wouldn't be better to put an enclosure around that as well while the landscape grows, so that you sort of have double protection. And having something a little more solid there will also help with noise, I think. Although I'm sure it's going to bounce off of that building. But anything that will bring a little warmth to that edge, I think is important. And so whether or not that's a completely different kind of fence, a wood fence or something else, or maybe it's higher and the pickets are closer, or something that really kind of helps with the way that the enclosure is. I mean, it's a tough landscape space, right? You're trying to put a lot into a pretty small space. And I think you've been successful with that. But now the next step, I think, is kind of loosening that so that it can feel more landscape-like, where you have to have straight lines, like at the enclosure, that's fine, but give a little relief on the other areas as well. And then let's go to the other image of, I think you have a perspective or at least a plan that shows up against the buildings and the landscape there.
Yep, this is showing the landscaping around.
Yeah. So Peter, how wide is that strip at the base of the building?
Which side?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's look. Like, if you go down to the left a little bit, I'm sorry, to the right.
Am I seeing 3'3"? Is that what I'm
So
seeing?
yeah, let me see if I can blow up each side for you.
Yeah, thanks.
So the landscaping along C Street is 3'3",
Yep.
and it no longer has a curb. It meets the sidewalk elevation, so it ties right into the sidewalk. the landscaping along First Street is about 6'6", but these are seating areas on both sides and very small landscaping areas just at the door entranceway. So,
Okay.
and that's because we've enlarged the sidewalk considerably on First Street.
Hang
On,
on one
oh,
second. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my own screen here. It just enlarged when it shouldn't have, but hang on a second. Ah, oh boy. So would you do me a favor and I can't seem to unzoom my window? Yeah. So
go
could you
smaller.
go? Yeah, thank you. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again.
So you have two seating areas along First Street for the retail areas.
Yep.
You have two small landscape areas that are just next to the entranceway.
Yep.
And that is about, I think, 6'6" in depth, and that also meets the sidewalk out plane. And then we've split up the share stations, so it's
Yep.
two separate share stations, and we put a tree in the middle so the tree spacing stays the same throughout the streetscape. And on the Second Street side, the landscaping area is about 3'8" on this other egress and entrance of the building. And then you have a landscape area that's really just, I think this is probably going to be just mulched at the same elevation. So this slopes down exactly at the same elevation as Mahoney Park.
Yep. The thing that I'm concerned about is that really narrow bed at the base of the building. I'm not sure that you're going to get a lot out of that. If you think about sort of the cross section of you have a curb there and then you need soil and then you have the building, and I'm a little concerned about whether or not that amount of space will leave you both, again, back to it's tough to do a landscape in a straight and narrow space. I'm wondering if that isn't better to either be used pretty judiciously, like I saw in the perspective at the corner where the retail is, that, maybe that's a reasonable area to use it, or are you better off just to let the building meet the ground and give a little more space to the feel of that whole sidewalk area? Or
Which side are we talking about, Lauren? Which side of the building?
the 3'3"
Oh,
side.
this on C Street, the C Street.
Yeah.
I'm wondering,
exactly.
can you go to a rendering of the, because I have a question for Laura and Peter. Can you go to the view of the stoops? You had you had a view that showed the stoop. Laura, I'm wondering, to your point, um, my question is, yeah, thank you
There
there.
you go.
Where the stoop does project into the street like that, I wonder if, without any landscaping there, that might be a little hard. Can you imagine a, planter situation maybe that does have a curb or something that would help mitigate the height of the brick wall a little bit, that's incorporated into the steps that maybe flanks those stairs so that there's like some landscaping at those moments? Rather than like up and down the whole street, for example?
Yes, and I think that's fair. I was also wondering whether or not to make this feel more stoop-like, if it would be helpful to have those buildings wider at the base, where they meet the sidewalk.
You mean
So
the stairs themselves?
yeah, the stairs themselves, and I need the
We-
architects to weigh in on
Yeah,
this.
Laura, we did play with that. We played with it quite a bit on different versions. And the problem is that it's probably too wide to go to the entire opening size. And as you widen this, you make this space that's on top of the landing, it makes it less and less usable. Right now, it becomes usable for a plant, a chair. You could put nice plants up there. There's a lot of things you could do with this space that if we widen out these stairs, this becomes almost like a little alligator space.
Mm.
That's why we decided to reduce it, but I do believe these are 6 foot wide. Erica, do you have a comment on how wide these stairs are? I think you have them in the drawing. No, I'm sorry, they're not. They're 4'8". They're currently 4'8", so they could be widened out. But
Yeah, I mean, Peter, to me, that feels like it's more of an egress than it is anything else because the building's big and
Yep.
the lot is big. And so I would love for the architects to kind of weigh in on how this entrance, like it's a lovely idea to think about stoops in the city, right? But you want them to feel gracious enough, I think, for them to work well. And you have two of them.
Yep.
So I would think about whether or not the stairs stretch in front of that raised area or whether or not they go the length or the width of it or get a little bit wider. But 4'8" feels really thin to me. And
Yep, yep,
again,
yep.
need the architects to weigh in on that. And then David, I have two thoughts about the planting. Yes, you could absolutely do it at that area, or you could also plan to have seasonal pots or something that really will contribute to sort of the life of the street. It's not that the planting wouldn't do that or that it's not important there, Peter. I think that it's more about what does it add and what can actually live there? Because there's nothing sadder than when a landscape fails, right? I mean, you almost can't fix it, right? And so you end up with kind of this muddy space. And so I just want to be cautious about that.
We have, Laura, we've had some luck with the ornamental grass at a couple of our properties, and it does very well in areas it's very drought resistant, and it does well with some sun, but not sun all day.
Yeah, okay.
And they become very big and very luscious over the years. As a matter of fact, we have to trim them every year.
Yeah. Okay. If you're dedicated to putting in something that's bulletproof like that, I think that could actually add some life in terms of like the swaying of the grasses, but something that doesn't look too tailored. And like you know, you're using it to hide the way the building hits the ground.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'll stop for the moment.
They were very good comments, Laura. Thank you.
So I can jump in really quickly. I'm the newest kid on the block, I guess, and but have the benefit of going back and re-looking at the videos of the earlier. So I kind of up to speed on the conversations. The thing that I do like is that there has been, quite a significant response to the massing and reducing, the heights, and the idea of reducing the shadow so it doesn't impact the park was significant. So I think, kudos to you for making those revisions because I think it's quite significant, the moves that you did make. Can you go back to the landscape plan for just a second? And Laura, I'm going to borrow your landscape expertise for just a second, but Mimi had said last time she had mentioned something about the quality of the plant species. And what's nice about the plan is that you can, see what's going on. But if you go to the perspective for just a second, I think one of the things that Mimi was asking for was something that I think you were asking for as well, is to really think about the heights of these and the ability to create that sort of separation and privacy. It was interesting to hear in public comment that the public was really saying that it really wanted to separate it more than it wanted to combine it with the
Yep.
adjacent park. So visually wanting to make sure that the species were able to create those outdoor rooms that provided the residents with that, quality of space, I think was important. And I think you were kind of alluding to that. And I think that's something that Mimi was pretty strongly a proponent of as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just to use some drawing again, but is there something that could really start to frame some of those views in, or help close them off, using trees that have branches that go all the way to the ground, or something like that, or smaller trees where the head of the tree is kind of helping to do some of the blocking.
Yeah, you also mentioned something, Laura, which I thought was interesting, which you didn't really clue into until you mentioned it on this view. The black metal fence that is shown here, I associate, and I'm sure other people associate, with public parks.
Yes.
It's a public
Right.
looking fence. Um, and when you suggested maybe different kinds of fencing, whether it's up against the building or on the side, it made me think that it would be to actually the development's benefit if the messaging of the fence itself was that this is actually not a part of the public realm, that this is actually kind of a private garden that is almost associated with the architecture. Like I could imagine if let's say there's brick on the base of the building, that there were some matching brick piers or something like that that came off the building, that integrated into that fencing or something, so that it's just really clear that this is a forecourt or a garden or whatever, that is associated with this building beyond. And that's just I don't know what the right answer is, but I just thought that was interesting comment.
Peter, I remember in looking at the documents that fence used to be higher.
There is currently a 6-foot chain link fence between the
Right,
properties.
right. And you lowered it to 42, but you might, I think it was
Yeah,
48, 42 or
Yeah,
48.
42. From the comments, it might be better if it's a wood cedar fence, to more privacy, a more private fence.
Yeah,
It might be, at least on
and
the
I think
sides.
higher too.
Yeah, 6 foot. Yeah, use a 6-foot fence. It would be much more private. It would definitely be a dividing line, as you're saying. And I think, Laura, what you're saying is if we had 3 or 4 large, nice trees along the border here, for a privacy measure, you're really starting to define. You really define, and the trees really shouldn't be in a line because I've never seen trees lined up before. They should be at various different spaces within the property.
Well, I'm going to be really bold here and wonder, there's a lot of sun here and you've pulled the building back, etc. There's nothing as beautiful as a tree in the middle of the lawn, and if it's the type of tree that gives dappled sunlight, you won't have any trouble growing grass underneath it. So I'm glad you mentioned
Yeah.
it, because
Yep, I agree with you.
I
totally
forgot to
agree with
say
you.
that. I forgot to say that I think it might be a little too hot.
I tend to lean towards red colored trees. So.
Oh, you do?
Yes, yes. So let's see if we can get a couple of those in here too.
And I just want to jump in, and just because, again, I've been part of several iterations of this conversation, I just want to, I guess, I'd like to gently push back on a higher wood fence. I do think
Please.
I would encourage what I heard was, how do we think about creating, screening where appropriate to sort of soften, whether it's the backdrop of the concrete of the adjoining building, to create some privacy for residents. I think there is a little bit of a delicate dance between, and this was something we discussed in prior meetings, of to what extent do you allow the two spaces, the private park and the public park, some transparency between the two, but also some screening. So I guess I would just question, can some of it be accomplished through landscape, versus a hard fence? And yeah, and just, is it a solid wood fence, or are there some ways to negotiate that? So I'm not suggesting one or the other. I'm just, I do think there's something appealing about having in a community that has a lot of hardscape, of having a little bit of flow or transparency between the two sites, but maybe it's not consistent across the border.
So I think what you're
Does that
saying
make sense?
is you think we should really do that privacy measure more with the plantings than with the fence. Even if we went with a wood fence, go with a 42 or a 48-inch wood fence, not
Or-
with a 6-foot fence, which starts to get harder, not softer.
But yeah, perhaps. Again, I think this is something that you can resolve, with the BPD
Mhm.
staff in terms of translating all of our comments, into a solution.
Yep, yep.
And again, without having all of the transcripts in front of me from all the different meetings and just raising that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of talk about transparency between the two parks.
So, and I feel
It's-
confident that you and your team, in conjunction with planning staff, can resolve that. I do know we need to go to public comments, but I just want to go back to the issue of the building stoops for a
Yeah.
minute.
Oh,
Can you go
good.
back to that detail? And Laura, I appreciate your question about the architecture. Again, as you continue to develop the design, I just encourage you, this looks very, as it's depicted in this rendering, looks very utilitarian.
Mhm.
And I wonder if there may be a way to think about how the steps and the railing meet the ground. I'm even looking at that railing on the first floor, wondering, could that be masonry rather than metal? And this is where,
Mhm.
as an architect, I would be inclined to look at, so what are some great precedents in Boston or in the neighborhood of how we address that transition? So I really, really commend your team for taking on the challenge of thinking about, how do we break up the long expanses of facade? How do we help the building meet the ground? But just, I think, I think a theme of tonight's discussion among the commissioners is, really the detailing is going to be very important as you continue to
Yep.
develop this building.
I would just add that it could be, I mean, I don't know exactly what the situation there might be, but because it's recessed and up and so forth, like I could imagine there may need to be a gate at the street that you unlock and open to go up into your stoop, just for a security point of view, and so that people aren't like hanging out in there, or at the top of the stairs. And it could be that is a design opportunity, that the stair actually gets centered in that opening. It's flanked by, as Laura said, either containers or some planters that maybe provide a little bit more solidity to where the railings are, and something a little bit more formal, so that it actually really does look like a front door of a townhouse, which will make it feel a little richer. Nice lighting, obviously, under that overhang. But looking at the plan, I think there could be a very nice scenario of coming up a set of stairs flanked by planters, and there's just enough space to have a light and to go to the right and go to the door. I'm not sure that the place for the chair might not end up being storage for a bicycle. It's like tied up to the thing. It might be better to just have one really nice grand stoop, times two, and something to consider.
Yep, that sounds great, David. I think your ideas are very, very good.
Just a few more comments, Peter. If you go back to the park first, just a sec, the view. Looking at the picketed fence up against the the building next door, is that on the opposite side of the sidewalk? Is that up against the building?
This fence here?
Yes.
No, there's a walkway on both sides.
And is the walkway a access or egress, or is it on your land or their land?
We actually have an egress on our side. Theirs, I don't believe is a egress at all. But they have another 3.5 feet on their side, 4 feet on their side. So there's 4 feet on their side and there's about 4.5, 5 feet on our side.
I
So there's a good separation between the two buildings of 9 feet, 10 feet.
Because if you look at the plan again for a second, I'm just wondering between on your right-hand side, if you zoom in or go to the plan that has the three.
This plan you want to look at?
If you zoom in on that,
Which
on
side? Which side would you like me to zoom in on?
the park itself.
Okay.
Do you need that sidewalk?
Yes, that is an egress. This is a handicap ramp that ties the upper courtyard to the lower park. And then we need access for our transformers as well. So we do need the egress.
Okay, so just another question on the corners. This is just a comment that would happen last time, and I think Mimi brought this up too, about the C Street and West Second corner. And I think you have a perspective of that corner.
Oh, yes.
You know, this corner versus the corner on the opposite side, which is the Mahoney Park side.
Yeah.
I think you have a vertical on that side in the massing. If you go to the perspective from C Street, looking at the corner, the opposite corner here.
The park itself. Again.
Yes.
Oh, a corner turret in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This here.
Yeah. So if you go to the left on West First Street. Sorry, I'm taking all
Is this the one you want me to go to West First Street corner?
Yes.
Yeah, that corner.
Yeah, so this one, and if you go to the end of the block next to the park.
Same.
You may go now. Where would you like me to go?
You're going to the right to the park side. Sorry, Peter.
I don't think I have a rendering in this packet. I do have a rendering. You're talking about the opposite end on First Street.
Yeah, I think in the elevation maybe then.
The corner condition's the same.
So the corner conditions mimic on both sides of the building.
Okay. One of the things that Mimi had mentioned there is whether the corner really wanted to be on the corner of C Street and West Second as a corner expression, and that the adjacency to the park may want to be quieter as it turns the corner and step down like the rest of the massing. So I'm just kind of reiterating a comment I think she made last week.
We should
Last
talk about,
time.
she was talking about the opposite corner.
Yeah, if you go to your elevations that are along the park.
I think we believe that the corner that we're illustrating there on First Street is more appropriate with in the context of the sort of commercial quality of First Street, where we're just trying to stay quieter, smaller on Second Street, given what's across the street from us.
Yeah, I think you're talking about this right here, this corner right here, David. Is that correct?
Yeah, that one sticks up compared to the C Street corner.
No, these two corners are
Both the same.
They're the same now.
Okay, all right.
So I think that might have been a comment that was from an earlier version that was before we dropped this.
Okay, all right.
This corner did stay the same. Everything else did drop. But I think that was a comment before when we had this particular addition or massing that was removed.
Okay. And then if you can go back to the C Street and First West Street, please. West First Street. Yeah, this one just thinking about the some of the detailing on the metal bays. On the left-hand side, are those the living rooms?
These here,
Yes.
those are metal bays as well.
Are they the living rooms into the units?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Yes.
the question.
Yeah, they're living rooms, and the smaller windows in between in the brick wall are the bedrooms.
And the question is it possible, like on the right-hand side, to have the window a little bit larger? I think one of the challenges for those bays is that the window proportion compared to the bay itself feels small. And I think, you know, to be able to really appreciate the living rooms with the smaller area, if you you look on the right-hand side where you have it looks like an entry, that bay has larger windows. It feels like proportionally it might be nicer for those bays to have a little bit more glass in them.
Yeah, that's a very good comment.
And then one of the things is at the top of the bay itself is a really big piece of metal compared to the proportion of the window, and whether that could be more of a glass rail, because I think, you know, because it's a solid rail into that balcony, plus it's set back, it's going to be a little darker with a solid rail. So wondering
Are
if
we
it might,
talking about these we're talking about the railings on these balconies?
at the bays actually.
No, on the C
Actually,
Street bays, those are parapet. Well, those bays extend up a few feet above the deck
So those
surface.
are the railing, David.
Yeah, I'm wondering at the top of the bays, you know, to lighten it and make it feel a little bit more friendly. There's a lot of metal above the window. There again, I think proportionally it might feel lighter and more terminating at the top of that if that was more of a glass rail. Yeah, I think it might be friendlier on the inside of the unit to get more, you know, light in that one as well. So
You could also notch it
yeah.
with a glass panel that carried that window proportion up to the top and sort of like notch that down if that was easier from a constructability point of view.
Yeah, I
But
think one of the
I
reasons.
agree, that's a heavy metal piece there.
Yeah, one of the reasons we try to simplify it and get rid of too many materials, but we can look at the glass railings on top of the bays. No, I do agree that would bring a lot more light into the units and the nice doors that are inside of them.
Yeah.
Thinking, yeah, just the perception of how big that space is within the unit and extending that. So just
Yep.
a suggestion. I know that you've made a lot of moves and I appreciate you, you know, considering a lot of these comments. So thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's a good comment. I think we'll look at that too. Yeah, I think we can get bigger windows in the bays though. The first comment you make, I really like. We'll also look at the glass and see if we can open that up a little bit too.
And then just one thing about the stoop itself, that one perspective, the contrast between the red brick and the brown. I think it's very you know, part of it's trying to understand the hierarchy of how you see the materials coming together. And so the contrast between the two seems like it might be a little harsh. You know, one thing that might be helpful is if, and this is just a suggestion on understanding the materiality that Anne Marie was talking about, but you know, using something like an iron spot brick has a little silvery quality to it, and it'll match up with the metal on the bays, so it starts to tie some of the materials together a little bit. I think there's a concern for the kind of the separation between all the materials and wanting to find a little bit of a language that starts to combine them a little bit.
And I would add the concrete as well, you know, the concrete and the mortar. So I think that really, you know, it is, you know, where the details are really where these projects sing. And I think being able to, you know, when you bring this to us next time, you know, being able to share, I realize some of this you'll continue to resolve with BPD staff, but I think the more you can illustrate that the concept of the materiality, and again, where the cues that you're drawing from in the surrounding buildings or the context of Boston will be really, really helpful to all of us.
Christina, are we taking public comment and so forth? I mean, I unfortunately have to jump off very soon, so I'm just trying to time myself.
We are, but it looks like we are just joined by the proponent and planning staff. So let me just read the script real quick and make sure.
Okay.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, dial *9 to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. I think I recognize every name on the attendee list. So
So can
I think
ma-
that's it.
Can I make a suggestion to my fellow commissioners, and obviously we can decide otherwise. But I think that first of all, I very much appreciate the spirit of this discussion and Peter, your willingness to explore some of these details. That being said, I think that the big moves here have been established. And I think that to the extent that they can incorporate as many of these comments as they can before they come back before us at a full commission for a vote, I would feel comfortable with that, noting that at that vote, if there are things that we feel still should be explored, we could make note of that for Boston planning staff to address. Does that feel good to people?
Sounds good to me.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. So no formal vote is needed since it's a subcommittee. I think we have clear direction for the proponent team. Thank you, commissioners, for your time this evening. Thanks to the proponent team, and we will work with you and the project manager to get you scheduled for full commission when appropriate.
Great.
So thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. I really
Thank you.
appreciate everybody's comments. You guys have made some great comments. We really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thanks,
Peter. Good
Peter.
luck with
Thanks,
it.
Peter.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good
Good night.
night.
Bye.